The morning sun dappled through the ancient oak trees in the Abernathy estate garden, painting shifting patterns on the dew-kissed grass. I knelt among my father's prize-winning roses, the white ones that smelled faintly of lemon and reminded me of his easy laughter. He was gone now, just 3 months, and the quiet ache of his absence was a constant companion. I found solace here, my hands in the soil, tending to the beauty he left behind. A crunch of expensive heels on the gravel path shattered the tranquility. I didn't need to turn. Only one person dared to wear shoes better suited for a boardroom than a garden path at my father's home. Jessica, Marcus's new wife. My ex-husband's trophy, gleaming with manufactured confidence. Still playing in the dirt, Sarah? Jessica's voice, syrupy sweet yet sharp as broken glass, cut through the morning air. I continued trimming a yellowed leaf, a small act of defiance. Someone has to, I replied, keeping my voice level. The white roses needed tending, just like everything else my father had built. She stepped closer, her shadow falling over the rose bush. I could almost feel the heat of her manufactured glamour. You know why I'm here. It wasn't a question. I finally stood, wiping the sweat and soil from my hands onto my gardening apron. Frankly, Jessica, I have no idea why you would trespass on private property. Her bright red lips curved into a smirk. Trespass? Darling, this is family property. Or it will be, very soon. The will is being read next week. Marcus and I thought it best we have a calm discussion about our rightful share before things get complicated. My grip tightened around the pruning shears. They felt heavy solid. There's nothing to discuss. This is my father's estate. His legacy. And Marcus was like a son to Mr. Abernathy for over 10 years, she countered, waving a dismissive hand. He was part of Abernathy Industries. He deserves a significant share. We both deserve it. The sheer audacity stole my breath for a second. Marcus? The same Marcus who cheated on his wife, your employer's daughter, no less with his secretary. Jessica shrugged, a practiced gesture that radiated indifference. That's all ancient history. Your father forgave him. They played golf almost every Friday right up until... She let the sentence hang, a calculated pause for effect. My father's illness had been swift at the end. 3 weeks felt like both yesterday and a lifetime ago. And now this vulture was circling. My father wouldn't have left Marcus a penny, I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. He made mistakes, yes, but he wasn't naive. He knew Marcus's limitations. He knew your ambitions. Jessica's smile flickered, a tiny crack in the facade. We'll see. Your brother David seems to think otherwise. He's been quite helpful. The mention of David sent a cold shiver down my spine. My brother. We hadn't been close since my divorce. He'd somehow managed to be more sympathetic to Marcus's difficult position than to my broken heart. Had Jessica gotten to him? Was he really siding with them? You talked to David? I asked, trying to keep the shock out of my voice. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a confidential, mocking whisper. Oh, sweetheart, we've done more than just talk. He's been instrumental. Her eyes glinted with triumph. He understands that times change, and some people are simply more adaptable than others. Unlike you, stuck here in your little garden, pretending the world hasn't moved on. I gripped the shears tighter, remembering something my father had taught me about these roses. They require a firm hand, Sarah, but never a cruel one. Even the thorns have their place. Get off my property, Jessica, I said, my voice low and steady. No. Before I decide, politeness isn't required. She laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. Your property? That's adorable. This estate, Abernathy Industries, it's worth over $500 million. Did you really think you could just inherit it all? Play lady of the manor while others who are just as deserving get nothing? Marcus was practically a son. And she paused, straightening her shoulders. I understand business. I know how to grow things. Unlike you tending flowers. My father built this company, brick by brick, deal by deal, I thought, my anger a cold, hard knot in my stomach. He poured his life into it. This isn't just about money. It's about his vision. He built this with integrity and hard work, I stated, finding strength in the memory of his principles. He cared about more than just the bottom line. Jessica snorted. Legacy, integrity. Please. Everything is about money, Sarah. And next week, when that will is read, you'll finally understand. Abernathy Industries needs someone with a modern touch. Someone ruthless enough to thrive. She turned, walking back towards the path. At the garden gate, she paused and looked back, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Oh, and you should start packing. Marcus and I will need at least a month to renovate before we move in. We'll make sure a little corner of the grounds is kept for your hobby. As her heels clicked away down the gravel, then faded as her car pulled away, I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. The pristine white petals of the rose had been crushed where my fingers had clenched, staining them with dirt. My father always said white roses symbolized new beginnings. But all I saw was the dirt, the stain, the violation of something pure. Jessica had brought her ugliness into my sanctuary. But then, something glinted near the base of the old stone sundial, a piece my father had cherished. It was a small, weathered wooden box, partially hidden by overgrown ivy. My heart skipped a beat. It looked old, intentionally concealed. With trembling hands, I reached for it. It was heavier than I expected. A wave of intuition washed over me. This wasn't just random garden debris. This was from him. My father. And suddenly, the cold knot in my stomach began to loosen, replaced by a different kind of heat. Curiosity. Hope. What had he left for me? Still clutching the wooden box, I walked back towards the house, towards my father's study. The air in the study was thick with his memory, the comforting scent of old books, leather, and the faintest hint of his pipe tobacco. I sat on the edge of his worn leather chair, the box in my lap, feeling overwhelmed. Jessica's words had shaken me, but finding this box, it felt like a lifeline. Ms. Evelyn Reed arrived within the hour, her presence calm and reassuring. Miss Reed wasn't just my father's lawyer. She was a family friend, sharp as a tack and utterly discreet. I handed her the box, explaining where I'd found it and what Jessica had said. Jessica, of course, Ms. Reed sighed, running a hand through her short, graying hair. That woman is a force of nature, unfortunately. A destructive one. She examined the box. John. Mr. Abernathy always did have a penchant for hiding things in plain sight. We turned the box over. It was simple, sturdy, with a small, old-fashioned lock. There didn't seem to be a keyhole initially, but running my fingers along the bottom edge, I found it cleverly disguised beneath a slightly raised piece of wood. He always said the best secrets were the ones everyone overlooked, I murmured, remembering his lessons. Beneath the box, tucked into the soil and ivy, was a small, tarnished brass key. It felt cool and solid in my palm. I inserted it into the lock. With a soft click, the box opened. Inside wasn't jewelry or money. It was a thick envelope, sealed with wax, and a single smooth skipping stone, the kind my father used to keep in a bowl on his desk. I picked up the stone, its familiarity a comfort. Then, I carefully opened the envelope. It was a letter, written in my father's familiar hand, slightly faded but still strong. I started reading aloud, my voice thick with emotion. My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, then my time has passed, and it seems the sharks, as I privately called them, have begun circling. Knowing human nature and having seen Jessica's true colors behind that manufactured smile, I suspect she is leading the charge, likely dragging poor Marcus along with her. Finding this box means you remembered the sundial, the place we'd sit and plan our garden projects. Always look where others just glance. The stone is a reminder to always aim true and skip over the rough patches. The key, as you may have guessed, opens the bottom left drawer of my desk. But it's not the main drawer. Look carefully for the hidden lock. Inside that compartment, you will find what you need to protect yourself, Abernathy Industries, and everything I've built. I anticipated this possibility. I didn't want to burden you while I was sick, but I couldn't leave you unprepared. Remember our talks about chess? Sometimes you have to sacrifice a pawn to protect your queen. Or, in business, sometimes you have to let someone think they're winning to ensure their true intentions are exposed. Trust Evelyn. She knows more than she let on, per my instructions. And keep an open mind about your brother. Family dynamics can be complex, especially when money is involved. I love you, my daughter. Protect the legacy, but most importantly, protect yourself. All my love, Dad. I finished reading, my eyes wet. Miss Reed poured us both a glass of water from the decanter on the desk. He was extraordinary, Sarah, she said softly. You knew about this? I asked, looking up at her. I knew he was working on something outside the main will, something he called his contingency plan, she admitted. He came to me about 7 months ago, shortly after his diagnosis. He was incredibly clear-headed and determined. He suspected certain individuals might try to capitalize on his passing or the company's vulnerability. He wanted to set safeguards. We moved to the desk. It was a massive, solid oak piece. I examined the bottom left drawer. There it was, a tiny, almost invisible keyhole hidden beneath the trim. The brass key fit. With a soft click, the drawer opened, revealing a false bottom. I lifted it. Beneath lay a thick, well-organized folder and a sleek, heavy USB drive. This was it. This was what my father had prepared. Before we dive into those, Ms. Reed said, sitting on the edge of the desk, her expression serious. There's something you should know about the will reading. Your father added a specific clause, very unique, just 2 days before he passed. I helped him finalize it. It's called the contingency clause, and it's designed to turn everything on its head. My heart pounded. A contingency clause? A change to the will? More than that, she explained. It's a condition, and it's linked directly to whatever evidence your father collected. I carefully lifted the folder and the USB. The folder contained dozens of printed documents, emails, bank statements, notarized affidavits, and photos. So many photos. Jessica meeting someone in a dimly lit parking lot outside the city. Marcus walking into the offices of Blackwood Holdings, one of Abernathy Industries' most aggressive rivals. Screenshots of encrypted messages. My father hadn't just suspected them. He'd been investigating. He had them watched. I whispered, flipping through the photos, the cold reality of their deceit hitting me. Not just watched, Ms. Reed said, a glint in her eye. He had a team put together. Discreet, professional. He wanted undeniable proof. She picked up the USB drive. This is where the bulk of it is. Video footage, audio recordings. Everything. Your father was meticulous. My hands trembled as I looked at a sequence of photos. Was that? Yes. It was David. My brother, meeting with Jessica. This sequence was dated just a few weeks before my father's death. My stomach twisted. Jessica hadn't been lying. David had been meeting with her. The pain of his perceived betrayal resurfaced. But Jessica said David was helping them. I stammered, looking from the photos to Ms. Reed, utterly confused. Ms. Reed placed a hand on my arm. Let's look at the videos first, Sarah. Your father's message about your brother wasn't just a cryptic hint. There's something you need to see about David's involvement. We plugged the USB into the secure computer system my father used for confidential matters. Accessing the drive required a password, the name of the specific sundial in the garden. Another small detail, another piece of my father's puzzle. The drive opened. The files were neatly organized by date. We started with the oldest ones, following the timeline of their plotting. There were videos of Jessica and Marcus discussing Abernathy Industries, their voices smug and dismissive. They talked about how much the company was really worth, how easy it would be to liquidate assets, sell off promising projects like the Legacy Tower to rivals for a quick profit. It wasn't about joining the company or continuing its work. It was about stripping it bare. Then came the recordings involving David. My heart sank as I listened to him discussing company structure, details about key personnel, and even personal family information with Jessica and Marcus. It sounded exactly like what Jessica had bragged about, David feeding them information. But as we continued through the files, the narrative shifted. Later recordings showed David's discomfort, his hesitations, and then a crucial audio file. It was a conversation between Daniel and Jessica, recorded discreetly. Jessica was offering him a significant sum of money, $500,000, the exact amount she'd mentioned to me in the garden, in exchange for him providing testimony that our father was not mentally sound when he made his final will amendments. David refused. His voice, though low, was firm. I won't lie. Our father was sharp as a tack, even at the end. And I won't betray my sister. Jessica's voice turned venomous. You idiot. This is a golden opportunity. You think Sarah will cut you in? She'll keep everything. Marcus was family. We are family now. We'll make sure you're taken care of. Taken care of by destroying our father's legacy and hurting Sarah? Daniel retorted, his voice filled with disgust. No, thank you. I'm done with this. Don't contact me again. Ms. Reed paused the recording. My eyes welled up, but this time not with sadness. With relief. And profound guilt for doubting him. He was playing them, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. He was pretending to help them to get proof. Exactly, Ms. Reed confirmed. Your father and I suspected something was happening. He asked David to act as a go-between, to see what information they were after, and what they were planning. Daniel hated it. He felt like a spy, but he agreed because he wanted to protect you and his father's legacy. He was feeding them just enough innocuous information to keep them confident, while gathering the real evidence. He even gave your father a copy of that recording where Jessica offered him the bribe. Another video showed Jessica meeting with a former nurse who had cared for my father, attempting to extract information about his mental state in his final days, offering cash. The nurse refused, secretly recording the conversation for her own protection, and later gave the recording to Ms. Reed, who forwarded it to my father's investigation team. The scale of their plotting was breathtaking. They weren't just opportunists. They were actively trying to dismantle the company and smear my father's reputation to gain control. There were even documents showing they were trying to set up shell companies to divert Abernathy Industries funds through fake consultancy fees related to the Legacy Tower project. The $500 million company wasn't just a figure to inherit. It was a target for sophisticated financial attack. This is why your father added the contingency clause, Ms. Reed explained, pulling out the legal documents related to the will amendment. He knew simply disinheriting them wouldn't be enough. They would contest the will, drag his name and the company through the mud, cause endless legal battles. He needed a way to stop them cold. To expose them publicly, legally, undeniably. She laid out the document. The clause states that anyone named in the will who accepts any portion of the inheritance thereby agrees to a full, transparent investigation into financial activities and any actions detrimental to Abernathy Industries in the 6 months prior to his death, using evidence he compiled. If that investigation proves malicious intent, fraud, or conspiracy related to their claim or actions against the company, their inheritance is nullified, and the evidence is automatically submitted to the appropriate legal authorities for criminal prosecution. It was genius. My father's final, masterful move in the chess game. He was using their greed against them. They would be so eager to claim the inheritance, they would trigger the very mechanism that would destroy them. He let them think they won. I breathed, finally understanding the full scope of his plan. He set a trap, knowing they'd walk right into it. Exactly, Ms. Reed said, a rare smile of admiration for my father on her face. He didn't want a messy fight after he was gone. He wanted a swift, undeniable victory for truth and justice. Ms. Reed then mentioned, David has the original bribe check Jessica gave him and his own comprehensive copies of the recordings. He's been waiting to give them to you personally before the reading. He's outside now. He wanted to give you everything himself. My brother. My brave, loyal brother. I had doubted him. The weight of that doubt lifted, replaced by a surge of love and gratitude. Let him in, I said, my voice filled with a new strength. It's time. David walked in, looking tired and drawn, but his eyes held a fierce, protective light I hadn't seen in years. He carried a worn leather satchel. Sarah, he said, his voice hesitant, unsure of my reaction after Jessica's claims. I stood and walked towards him, wrapping my arms around him in a fierce hug. You magnificent idiot, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. I am so sorry I ever doubted you. He hugged me back tightly. It's okay, Sarah. It was a nightmare. Pretending, letting them think they were getting away with it. He pulled back, opening the satchel. Here. Everything. He laid out the crisp $500,000 check Jessica had offered him, proof of her attempted bribery. He showed me his own copies of the recordings, confirming the timeline and the depth of their manipulation. He had even recorded their excited, gloating phone calls after they thought they had secured his help. They were planning to say Dad was senile, that he wasn't in his right mind when he added the clause, when he structured the will the way he did. David explained, his voice tight with anger. Jessica was confident she could find enough disgruntled former employees, or even twist something a doctor said. The money was for me to back up her lies. We spent the next few hours going through everything together, me, Daniel, and Ms. Reed. The recordings were damning. Jessica's voice cold and calculating, planning to sell off major Abernathy Industries assets, discussing how to avoid paying taxes, even plotting to sabotage the Legacy Tower groundbreaking ceremony to devalue the company's stock right before they took control. Marcus sounded weaker, sometimes hesitant, but always ultimately agreeing to her schemes. Sarah can go back to her little apartment and that silly art gallery job. Daniel quoted from one of the recordings, his jaw tight. She never deserved any of this anyway. That was Marcus. The words stung, but the knowledge of their impending downfall dulled the pain. They didn't just want money. They wanted to erase me, to diminish everything I cared about. Jessica's malice was personal. Daniel also showed me evidence of Jessica's activities before she married Marcus, a history of similar patterns, getting involved with wealthy men, often tied to businesses, and leaving a trail of financial irregularities. It confirmed my father's shark analogy was chillingly accurate. She's been doing this for years, in different cities, different industries, Daniel said. Dad's team found it. She saw Marcus as an easy mark, a way into Abernathy Industries. She cultivated the affair, then pushed for the marriage, all with this goal in mind. It was a sickening realization, seeing their entire relationship laid out as a calculated, mercenary plot. My marriage hadn't just failed because Marcus was weak, it had been a stepping stone for a predator. She even hired a film crew, Daniel added, almost in disbelief, to capture the will reading, to film their grand moment of taking over. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. She wants to film her own public execution. My father would have appreciated the dark irony. As the night wore on, the tension in the room was palpable, but it was the tension of anticipation, not fear. We had the truth, we had the evidence, and we had my father's perfectly crafted trap. Tomorrow, I said, looking out the study window at the moonlit garden, seeing the sundial where the box had been hidden. They think they're walking into a victory celebration. Daniel put a hand on my shoulder. They're walking into a reckoning. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed, marking the late hour. Each resonant tone seemed to tick down the seconds towards their fate. We reviewed the plan one last time with Ms. Reed. Every piece of evidence was catalogued, copies secured. The contingency clause was airtight. Are you ready, Sarah? Ms. Reed asked, her eyes serious. I looked at Daniel, at the pile of damning evidence on the desk, at the photograph of my father on the wall, his kind, wise eyes seeming to watch over us. I'm ready, I said, my voice steady. My father prepared me. The morning of the will reading dawned bright and clear. The air in the house, usually quiet and filled with the echoes of grief, now buzzed with a strange energy. Ms. Reed, Daniel, and I gathered in the large formal library, the chosen venue for the reading, spacious enough for all attendees and, yes, the camera crew. Mr. Henderson, the stoic head of operations at Abernathy Industries for 30 years, approached me before things began. Sarah, he said, his voice low. We've heard rumors about Marcus and his wife. People are worried about the company, about the Legacy Tower project. Your father, he built this company on trust. I know, Mr. Henderson, I assured him, meeting his worried gaze. Trust was everything to my father. And I promise you, his legacy and this company will be protected. Today, the truth will come out. His shoulders seemed to relax slightly, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Jessica's hired camera crew was already setting up, their lights and equipment a stark contrast to the room's old-world elegance. Jessica herself arrived shortly after, arm in arm with a fidgeting Marcus. She wore a stunningly expensive dress, her face radiating an air of triumphant confidence. She greeted other family members and executives with overly sweet smiles, clearly relishing the attention. Just smile and look confident, Marcus, I heard her hiss to him as they passed. This is our moment. She spotted me and offered a saccharine wave. "Morning, Sarah. Isn't this exciting?" I simply nodded, offering nothing. "Places, everyone," Ms. Reed announced, stepping behind the large table arranged at the front of the room. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes, when they met mine, held a spark of steel. "Let the reading of Mr. John Abernathy's last will and testament commence." The room settled into a tense silence. Ms. Reed began reading, her voice clear and formal. She covered the initial, smaller bequests, charities, distant relatives, long-term employees. Jessica and Marcus sat forward, their impatience palpable. The cameras whirred softly. Then Ms. Reed reached the core of the will, the estate, the company, the vast fortune. As expected, she read the section outlining the significant inheritance for Marcus and Jessica, a substantial percentage of the net value of the estate and Abernathy Industries shares. Jessica's carefully composed facade cracked. She beamed, squeezing Marcus's arm, a small, victorious sound escaping her lips. Marcus managed a weak, relieved smile. They exchanged a triumphant glance, clearly believing they had won. Jessica even whispered something to her lawyer, who gave a small, congratulatory nod. This was the trigger. Ms. Reed paused, allowing their brief moment of gloating to hang in the air. Then her voice, calm but carrying absolute authority, cut through the silence. "And now," she stated, looking directly at Jessica and Marcus, "per the explicit instructions and final amendment made by Mr. John Abernathy on October 28th, just 2 days before his passing, I will read the contingency clause. This clause is now activated. Upon the acceptance by Mr. Marcus Abernathy and Ms. Jessica Abernathy of the inheritance portion, just read." Jessica's triumphant smile froze. Marcus's eyes widened in alarm. Their lawyer suddenly looked very uncomfortable. A ripple of confused murmurs went through the room. The camera crew seemed momentarily unsure whether to keep filming. "Oh, what?" Jessica stammered, her voice losing its sweetness. "A condition," Ms. Reed clarified, her gaze unwavering. She then read the contingency clause in full. Her voice was firm as she detailed how acceptance meant automatic consent to a thorough public investigation using evidence compiled by Mr. Abernathy himself, and the consequence of forfeiture and legal referral if malicious intent or illegal activity was found. What kind of investigation?" Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper, his face pale. "The kind that answers questions about attempted bribery of key personnel, fraudulent financial schemes targeting Abernathy Industries assets, conspiracy to defraud, and attempts to undermine the value and reputation of the company and its flagship project, the Legacy Tower," Ms. Reed stated, her voice gaining power. She then began to lay out the evidence. She placed stacks of documents on the table: bank records, email printouts, notarized affidavits. She slid several key surveillance photos across the table: Jessica meeting with a rival, Marcus entering Blackwood Holdings offices, Jessica trying to bribe the nurse. "This isn't all," she continued, picking up the USB drive. "Mr. Abernathy compiled extensive video and audio recordings." Jessica shot out of her chair, sending it crashing backward. "Stop. Stop this right now. Turn those cameras off." I stepped forward, my voice strong. "No, Jessica. The cameras stay. You wanted this moment filmed, remember? You wanted the world to see you take control. You can't do this," she shrieked, turning to Marcus. "Marcus, tell them they can't do this. This is illegal." But Marcus was staring at a photo Ms. Reed had just placed down, a clear image of him carrying a briefcase containing confidential Abernathy Industries documents into the Blackwood Holdings building. His face was ashen, defeat etched on his features. "The contingency clause is perfectly legal and binding," Ms. Reed said calmly, her voice cutting through Jessica's hysteria. "Your acceptance triggered it. The evidence is undeniable. If you try to accept any part of this inheritance, the full weight of this evidence goes straight to the authorities. The choice is yours. Walk away with nothing but your shame, or accept and face criminal prosecution." Jessica laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "Choice? You've trapped us." "No," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "You trapped yourselves. Every lie you told, every scheme you hatched, every person you tried to manipulate, every attempt to steal what wasn't yours, it all led you right here. This is the consequence of your own actions." Jessica's eyes, wild with rage, darted to Daniel. You were supposed to help us. You betrayed us. Daniel stood tall, meeting her gaze without flinching. I did help, he said quietly. I helped my father expose the truth. I helped protect his legacy. Just not in the way you expected. Marcus, Jessica pleaded, turning back to her husband. Say something. Do something. But Marcus slowly sat back down, burying his face in his hands. It's over, Jessica, he mumbled, his voice devoid of hope. We lost. Lost? The hell we did, she screamed, her voice cracking. I won't let her win. That girl. She pointed at me, contempt dripping from the word. She's nothing. She can't run this company. She'll ruin it. Just then, a voice calm and familiar filled the room. That girl, the voice said, strong and clear, is my daughter. Everyone froze. Ms. Reed had pressed play on a hidden speaker. On a screen previously used for corporate presentations, my father's face appeared. It was a video recording, made just days before he died. He looked thinner, tired, but his eyes were clear and resolute. If you are watching this, my father said in the video, his gaze seeming to sweep across the room, it means the contingency clause was triggered. It means you, who thought you could take advantage, have shown your true colors exactly as I expected you would. He looked directly into the camera, his voice firm. Jessica, Marcus, you saw my company, my legacy, my family, as nothing more than assets to be plundered. You underestimated the bonds of loyalty and the resolve of those who value integrity over greed. His gaze softened as he seemed to look at me. Sarah, my daughter, you have faced betrayal and loss with grace and strength. I built this trap not just to catch predators, but to empower you. To show you that foresight, truth, and unwavering principle are the strongest defenses. He looked back at the general audience, then, finally, directly towards where Jessica and Marcus stood frozen in horror. Greed is a terrible teacher, my father's voice echoed through the silent room. But consequences teach very well indeed. Jessica stumbled backward, her face a mask of absolute humiliation and fury. Marcus remained slumped in his chair, defeated. The cameras kept rolling, capturing their downfall for the public record. The game was over. The trap had sprung. And my father's final lesson was delivered with devastating precision. In the stunned silence that followed the end of the video, Ms. Reed calmly collected the evidence, securing it for transfer to the authorities. Jessica, her elaborate facade completely shattered, was muttering threats under her breath as her bewildered lawyer tried to guide her towards the exit. Marcus followed, a ghost of the man I once married, unable to even look at me. They left, their heads bowed in shame, their dreams of stolen wealth dissolving into the reality of impending legal consequences. Other attendees, executives, family members, came over, offering words of support, relief, and admiration for my father's cleverness. Mr. Henderson clasped my hand, his eyes genuinely warm. Your father would be so proud, Sarah. The company is in good hands. Later, in the quiet of the study, Daniel, Ms. Reed, and I sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the comforting presence of my father's books and his lingering scent. The pile of evidence on the desk was a stark reminder of the battle just won. He planned for everything, Daniel said softly, shaking his head. Even from his deathbed. He loved you both very much, Ms. Reed added, her voice gentle. His greatest concern wasn't just the company, but ensuring you were safe and able to protect yourselves. I picked up the skipping stone from the open wooden box, turning it over in my fingers. Aim true, I murmured, recalling his words in the letter. And skip over the rough patches. Looking out the window towards the city skyline where the Legacy Tower, Abernathy Industries' most ambitious project, was beginning to rise, I felt a profound sense of peace mixed with determination. The pain of loss was still there, a dull ache, but it was now tempered by the strength of his legacy and the clarity of knowing the truth. Jessica and Marcus would face the legal consequences of their actions. Their public humiliation at the will reading, filmed and soon to be widely known, was just the beginning of their reckoning. Justice, as my father intended, was being served. The house felt like home again, no longer threatened by the shadow of their greed. The garden, the study, the company. It wasn't just property or money. It was the culmination of my father's life, his vision, his trust. And he had armed me, his daughter, not with wealth alone, but with the wisdom and means to defend it and myself. I wasn't just inheriting a company. I was stepping into my father's shoes, ready to lead, protect, and build upon the legacy he entrusted to me. The path ahead wouldn't be without challenges, but armed with the truth and the strength he instilled in me, I was ready. Ready to aim true. Ready to skip.